Welcome to Beyond the Surface. On our podcast, we highlight underrepresented voices in architecture. We'll humanize architects by uncovering who they are beyond the surface. Hi, I'm your host, Alex Sanchez, representing Illinois Tech's student chapter of the National Organization of Minority Architects. Today's episode is called Everything is Architecture with our guest, Dr. L. David Stewart. Dr. Stewart is an advocate and consultant for race, equity, diversity, and inclusion initiatives for companies. He has a doctorate in business administration from National Louis University, where he researched representation of Black architects in the U.S. He has a master's of real estate, an MBA in marketing, and a BA in architecture studies. He's a construction manager and a member of the National Organization of Minority Architects. Today, Dr. Stewart leverages his experiences as an educator, consultant, designer, and strategist to initiate change in communities globally using design, entrepreneurship, and business development. Thank you for being here with us today. How are you feeling?
Thank you. I'm doing pretty well. It's good to be here. Looking forward to having a great conversation.
I'm grateful you took the time out of your day to be here. So why don't we start the conversation?
Sure.
So can you tell us about growing up in Chicago and how your background shaped your identity?
So born and raised in Chicago, South Side and North Side. I grew up in Chicago in the 80s when a few other negative things were kind of prominent in the city. But I always had an interest in buildings at a young age. They just intrigued me. When I was in 8th grade, I decided I wanted to be an architect. Didn't know an architect personally. I just thought it was cool because who makes the buildings? Moved north to go to the north side of the city to go to Lane Tech because it had, at that time, a major, more or less, in architecture, engineering, graphics, and design. Chicago and that experience really shaped me in the sense that Chicago has a certain level of grit to it that adds to everything you do. When you're here, it's hard to explain if you haven't lived here. It's a city of workers. It's a city of straightforwardness. It's a city of people who, as they say, get to it. So it shaped me in understanding the diversity of the world, the cruelty of the world, but the beauty of the world too.
I feel like in Chicago, if there's anything I've seen, is it does have the mixture of experiences that you are expressing right now. Like, it's a beautiful city, but then later you also see all the problems with it, like the way the city is divided and the way they fund certain communities and underfund certain communities. So I understand what you mean. Can you expand on how the city influenced your path to architecture?
So when I was younger, I was a graffiti artist. Being a graffiti artist back then was different for a plethora of reasons I won't get into. But being a graffiti artist allowed me to see the city. So as someone who, I'll say, contributed to the elements of the building, you learn a lot. You learn, for instance, how paint interacts with brick, how paint interacts with concrete. And while doing it, it's like, well, pay attention to the canvas. So that really ironically made me dig deeper into architecture. And then before college, I was at a high school where we had a lot of drafting competitions. So it went from painting and graffiti to drawing these buildings. And drawing these buildings, you start seeing, wow, what is a floor plan? What is a section? What is an elevation? How does this all come together to make the building that you're in? And at the time, it wasn't taught to us directly, but it sparked a curiosity that then formed itself when I started college at UIC for my first architecture program. So all of this visualizing and being and seeing the city kind of nurtures my interest in architecture to the point of, okay, now I want to see if I can contribute to this.
So your desire for architecture started with graffiti.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting because I probably have never heard that before. But most architecture people start from art and the admiration of buildings and art. So can you talk about your path to UIC and getting into architecture?
Oh boy, I was wondering, was this going to come up? So initially I learned how to draw. I'm self-taught as an artist at 12. I get into drawing, learn graffiti on my own, start drafting. It was interesting because when I first got into art, I didn't know how to make a career out of it. And someone told me you can't be an artist because artists don't make money till they're dead. Kind of morbid personally. So it was like, okay, so how can I do this creative field? I'd never had an interest in being a lawyer. Well, take that back, I did. Never wanted to be a doctor. So I was like, well, what can a creative person do? And this is a very important part of the story. because as an African American growing up, I did not see me in architecture. So you see a basketball player, you see an entertainer, but it's like, okay, how do I become an architect? So what led me to UIC, ironically, was I was denied twice admission to the very school we're in right now.
Oh.
So I graduated high school in 1998. I did a year of community college at Harold Washington. One of my first architectural heroes was Walter Gropius. His book, Total Scope of Architecture, changed my life. His view of architecture framed my view. I had never heard of Mies van der Rohe, ironically saying that here, right? But I was really interested in Walter Gropius because Walter had a very wide view of architecture. It was very kind of altruistic. So I was like, all right, cool. Where do you go to school in architecture? In Chicago. At the time, I was like, oh, IIT. So I wanted to go there. I was denied the first time. And then the second time I got denied, I was like, no one says no to me twice. But it actually worked out because IIT as a program at the time, and I could be wrong, was more science and construction based. Me having an art background, and this gets into understanding architectural nomenclature, I was really at the time more interested in design. So UIC actually was the better fit for me, where in my development, if you will, because I was really you guys are students, I call it the design snob culture. It's like you have this architect or architects you look up to, you emulate them. I'm dating myself, but it was Frank Gehry, Sunram Koolhaas. So all of us dressed in black, the little glasses to seem like so avant-garde. And when I got to UIC, it was another level of learning because it was different from high school. Concurrently, I've been working in architecture since 16. So I got my very first architectural job, and this is ahead of your time, from looking in a phone book. I literally kept calling. I was like, somebody's gonna hire me, and I got to L. I won't mention their name, but they ultimately hired me. So I got my first internship in junior and senior year. Senior year, I won an internship with the Newhouse Architecture Competition, which is what now is Chicago Architecture Center. After I had the internship, they kept me. So I stayed with that firm, which is Stantec, formerly VOA, for 2.5 years. So all of this leads me to UIC in a good and a bad way. And I say that because unlike most peers, I was going into architecture school at 19 with 2.5 years of actual experience coming in the door. So while that was good, it also jaded me a little because I knew how the real world worked. So while we're doing these design projects with no budget, no reality, I'm working on, as an intern, Northwestern Memorial Hospital, and I'm looking at like, wow, there's money, there's time, there's deadlines, and all these other things that are way beyond design. It's not just making the pretty building, it's how do you make the pretty building a real thing? How do you pay for it? How do you pay people to do it? So all of this starts to frame an internal argument that I had where it's like, I love design, but I realize architects are horrible business people. It's the truth, and it's the truth because we're not taught. And we'll dovetail into this later as far as me as an academic and a professor. But one of the most important classes in your architectural educational development is so undersold. It's professional practice. And I say that because, as I mentioned, I come into architecture school with 2.5 years of experience working for one of the largest firms in the city. So there was a little bit of arrogance to me because while we're talking about design, I'm sitting here like, okay, when we're done, I have to go back to work and work on real blueprints. So when I got to professional practice, I fell in love. I'm like, okay, this is what the industry is like. But most people are like, yeah, whatever, I got to get back to the studio. The truth of the matter is, if you make it through architecture school, less than 5 to 10% of your peers actually do design. And if you haven't heard this before, when you get your degree, you think you're like going to be the next designer because you have a portfolio. You're like, I'm great. 90% of the time, you're going to start doing drafting. You're going to do details. So you almost feel like, what did I do all this creative work for? So you go through doing details, you do different things, and you evolve and grow. But no one tells you if you want to be an architect, how do you get paid? That was then the aha moment I had around my sophomore year. So The frustration is in professional practice, it's like, okay, we're going to go to a firm, we're going to walk you around a firm, introduce you to architects, and you're going to write a paper about something, and that's it. Meanwhile, you spend 90% of your time doing stuff for a portfolio that becomes irrelevant 2 years after you graduate. So in my mind, I'm having a WTF moment. What's going on here? The truth of the matter is the profession of architecture has always existed in a very avant-garde level, and this gets into equity, diversity, and inclusion. The profession of architecture starts in 1857. You're like, where are you going with this? Before the AIA formed, there was no profession of architecture. So who did the labor? This country at that time is still dealing with slavery and things of that nature. So you have your first architecture schools that come about in the late 1860s, 70s, so on and so forth. Your first HBCU, historically black college university, where African Americans can go to architecture schools, Tuskegee, 1888. So there's this thing where architecture doesn't allow the regular people, if you're minority, to participate. And this is the hard part that you even see today, because if you go to architecture school, supplies are expensive. And unless you come from money, you have to work. So if you have to work, you're already at a deficit because you cannot put the time in to be the avant-garde designer that made you want to be it in the first place. So now you're negotiating, how do I pay for all this and still have time to stay up? So the very beginning of architectural education speaks to inequalities that echo throughout the profession. That's what I saw. So I'm a 20-year-old seeing this, and I'm like, okay, how are we figuring this out? So to bring it full circle, the business of architecture is never taught because they say they want you to be architects. The problem is when you look at the level of education that all of us have went through, it is at the same level of a doctor or a lawyer, and yet we make $30,000 to $50,000 less coming out of school. Oh, and by the way, legally, you can't call yourself an architect. So you have to explain to your friends and your family that, oh, well, you're an architect. And you're like, I kind of am not. Because then it gets into the whole explanation of internship, and you don't want to be over Thanksgiving table explaining AXP and I'm an intern and I got to take this test and then I become licensed, right? So all of this is going on in my rattling head while I too am a NOMA's president, while I'm also a national NOMA board member. So I'm starting to understand the profession of the thing that I liked as that little kid. It's like, no one told me when I was drawing that I need to figure out how to get paid doing this. Because when you read the stories of architects like Frank Lloyd Wright, he could literally tell a client, like, this is what I'm going to draw for you. So we think that our portfolio is so amazing that someone's going to go, oh, I'm going to hire you. That's not how any of this works, if I may quote the commercial. So the problem then is you have architectural graduates who've done 4 or 5 years, they got a portfolio, and they feel they should be hired, but they are not prepared for what it is they're actually going to do. So I will conclude this point that I heard a quote from an old dean from University of Minnesota by the name of Tom Fisher. Tom Fisher said, if we taught our surgeons, and I'm paraphrasing, if we taught our surgeons the way we taught our architects, it would be more dead people on a gurney.
While you were at UIC, you became the NOMA's chapter president and became involved with NOMA National. Could you talk about your experiences in these positions?
Sure. Sophomore year, well, let me backtrack. I met Brian Hudson right after I graduated high school. Brian Hudson is the reason I became a member of NOMA. So if you're happy about it, you can thank him. If you dislike me because of that, you can blame him. So I'm a 18-year-old at the time, hip-hop loving hothead that likes architecture but doesn't know a gateway in. I'm working, but I really, at this point, don't see anybody that looks like me. Brian tells me about it. He had told me he had just graduated. Brian is more sage-like now, but I was called the second coming of Brian Hudson, and not in a good way. So I got to tell you how he used to be. So he was this militant black dude that was serious about architecture. And I'm like, again, now I see me there. So Brian tells me I'm leaving, we need to keep the NOMA's chapter going. I'm like, isn't NOMA Spanish for no more? I have a dark sense of humor too. So he was like, no, it's the National Organization of Minority Architecture Students. I'm like, all right, cool. So I joined in 99, my first year at UIC. I go to my first NOMA convention, 1999, Charlotte, North Carolina. If you've never been to a NOMA convention as a student, it is one of the most emotional things you will ever see. Because if you're in a space in architecture where you don't see yourself, you come to this conference at that time of 400 to 500 people. It's like the Spider-Man meme, like you, all of you are in architecture. So it gave me motivation. When I became the NOMA's president, I noticed something immediately nationally that was not wrong, but needed to be corrected. The NOMA's student representative position had just been formed, I think 3 or 4 years prior, and it was one person. You all are students. Imagine you as one person trying to manage national NOMA duties, your chapter duties. Oh, and by the way, you still got to go to school and work. So 2000, I was elected national student rep for NOMA. And during that time, I rewrote the Constitution. And one of the things that I instituted was 2 student reps on a staggered system. Because as students, there's no continuity, right? Once you get in your senior year, it's like, I don't care about nothing. I just want to graduate. So how do you maintain an agenda of some sorts? So it's like when you come out year A, the person who comes in, we can still move the organization forward. For me, that was my laboratory of learning things. So while student rep, I started digging into business, and then it was cool because I'm 20 years old, getting flew around the country for quarterly meetings. And while it was amazing, it was also detrimental because I got so wrapped up in that, my schoolwork kind of suffering. But I'm the NOMA's president. I'm the national student representative. So while I'm leaning into what I want to do, I had to remember my baseline. So my junior year, and I have a professor by the name of Cal Lejeune. He was most recently my boss at a previous employer. Cal Lejeune is an amazing man and one of the most brilliant design people I've ever met. Cal, like I said, is of African descent like myself, and Cal shot my wings down. So you got to understand, I'm a junior at this point. I done been to a few board meetings. I feel like I'm an adult. And when I would come in the studio, and everyone here knows this, when your professor comes to your desk to review, as you can see, I can talk, but Cal is like, I don't see none of that on the paper. And at this time, I'm so ingrained in racial issues and things like that, I forgot to be a design student. And one day we got into a discussion, I'll say a heated one, and he was like, what are you going to tell me? I'm from the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. You can't keep making excuses of race. You are not doing the work. So at the time, I'm clutching my imaginary pearls, like, how dare you tell me that? So long story less long, I'm failing his studio. Again, NOMA's president, failing. And he reminded me, hey, all what you're doing is great, but your primary purpose is to finish and get your degree. So I ended up getting a C out of his class. And I felt I should have had more. I tell this story, he can tell you, I can tell you it verbatim. So I brought my dad up to the school. And we get there, and Mr. Lejeune has a very interesting disposition and demeanor, I'll say. So I share my story, and Mr. Lejeune goes, oh, no, your son improved. He just didn't improve above a C. And my dad looks at me with the look like, what do you want me to do? And I say this story because at that time I was so involved in NOMA, I had forgot why I came to UIC in the first place. Because I was getting a big head. I was getting egotistical. Like, again, I'm 20 years old. I'm sitting with like legendary architects, and I have a seat at the table, but you're in school for architecture. You didn't go to school for NOMA. You went to school for architecture. But sophomore through senior year, I went through a transformation because I dealt with racial issues in architecture. I actually almost got into a heated argument with students over racial issues, and this is 1999, 2000. I actually got into a shouting match with a director of architecture. Like, I was that student that was really passionate, and I could be passionately wrong, where it was like, "Arr!" And I say all that to say it's the Bryans, it's the Cal Lejeunes, it's my mentor who passed, Ken Casey, that kind of pulled me back. And it was like, We see what you're doing, and that's great. But remember why you're here. You are here to get a degree. You are not here for NOMA or NOMAs. You shouldn't do nothing if you're not getting your grades together. And that was sobering because while NOMA is a vehicle for everybody here, you have to remember your why. And I think it's, especially as you get positions, it's seductive because it's like first time you probably have had a major position in your life. You're in college, like I'm president of a student organization, but you have to keep all of that in front of you. So while I'm going down this path and learning the business, my drawings were awful. So NOMA, while it grew me, it humbled me because the same people, even Brian was like, if you know Brian, you know how he talks. Dude, look, I get it. Caleb's laughing because I just did a perfect Brian Hudson imitation. Get your drawings done. Get your work done. And it was like, but no. So by the time I came to senior year, I had a better handle of what I wanted to do because of NOMA. But it wasn't the way you thought it was. It wasn't pretty, as you can hear. Would I trade those years? Not at all. Would I do something differently? Possibly. Because I was so wrapped up in what I could do nationally that I forgot to take care of home.
I find it interesting that you say that because I feel like even then that kind of guided your path to the whole race, equity, diversity, and inclusion. In that entire process, I feel like you also realized what you cared about most, even though right now you're not necessarily a designer, but you still do work that influences and impacts design itself and the architecture world.
I think I've told you before, I'm architecture adjacent. I tell architecture students, when you start architecture school, you want to be a designer. Here's what no one tells you. Somewhere in you, one night, you'll never admit it, there may come a part of you that realizes, I don't want to be a designer. But you come into this fraternity, if you will, because it's like, I got to be a designer. I have to make a cultural icon building. I got to make a museum. I got to do something that impacts the architectural urban fabric, insert architectural jargon here. Sometimes that's not what you want to end up doing. And for me, it was realizing that architects suck at business, architects suck at marketing, and you're good at both. I was an okay designer. Now, in our world, it's like, how dare you say that about yourself? Because there's a certain level of Kanye-level arrogance that comes with being in architecture school. Once you start getting good grades, the pomposity shows. But it's okay to realize that you're not good at what you thought you were. And architecture is a process. If you've never worked in a firm before, all you're doing in architectural school is what's called schematic design. That's all you're doing. And maybe design development. The money is in construction administration and construction drawings. So it's like, well, it's not about the money. Yeah, it is. But architecture almost tells you, don't worry about the money, do it for the culture. No. Because you then beget a culture of people who work all night and burn themselves out because they're doing it for the culture. Meanwhile, someone who's probably not a great designer is paying you to do that. Meanwhile, I'm traveling around the world.
Well spoken.
So I tell architecture students, find what you're good at in the process. You can't find that if you don't have an internship. Go get an internship, not just to get the experience, but figure out what do people really do during the course of a day in architecture. Because in school, it's romanticized. So you have people like me that will come to your school and go, oh, well, I worked for insert firm here and I make drawings and I design. And it sounds so fun. It's not. What a real architectural day is like is there's a deadline somewhere. There's a project. You may have multiple deadlines. You got to get these drawings because the client wants it by X time. What you don't know is if we don't get these drawings by X time, it affects Y in the contract that we can't get paid for a drawdown because we need this money so that way I can pay you. But you as an intern don't know that. You get paid maybe $15 an hour. It's a thing called overhead. They're charging for you $80 to $100 an hour. So once I start understanding that, my business mind is like, wait a minute. With all due respect, screw insert big name in architecture. You're charging $85 for me and I'm only getting $15? That's bad business. Like, then they say, well, you need overhead to cover the company. And you do. My thing is, I want to make more money off me. I don't want to be so culturally enamored that I'm economically deficient. And that's the thing architecture hates having the conversation about. Now, what put me in that space, as you said, is as I was going through this and finding myself, every time you have one of these revelations, you have what I call a oh damn moment, because you're like, wait a minute. When I was a kid, I wanted to make buildings. What they don't tell you is, in order to make the building, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of paper, and there's a lot of ink. Before you put a shovel in the ground, what has to happen? So it goes back to professional practice. No one teaches this. So by the time I got my degree in 2003, I was angry because at this point I have 5 years of experience and I feel like I should be way ahead of my peers. But I also feel like I was lied to. Like the seduction of architectural education was a lie. And every firm I was talking to before I went to grad school was, oh, you got a great portfolio, but you got to come in here and do details. In my mind, I'm like, I worked these 5 years so I can die just doing that. But the truth is, I didn't know much, but no one was teaching me what I wanted to know because most of the firm owners I know, they're barely scraping to keep their doors open. No one is mentoring me on a level of, I don't want to be a worker. I want to be a principal. I want to be the dude with the corner office. I want to be the owner. No one was teaching that. So when I look at architectural education and how it came full circle, it was learning what happened behind the curtain. And in some ways, I probably shouldn't have. I'm glad I did, but in many ways, I never got to enjoy architectural education because at this point, I'm a well-known NOMA member, well-known NOMAS member. So I will conclude the point by saying this. I ended up at University of Toronto because I wanted to go somewhere where no one knew my name because I had became such a polarizing figure. And if Brian Hudson can corroborate what I'm about to say, I almost gave a NOMA founder a heart attack.
I read about this story. You told me.
So the story goes as follows. It's 2003. I am coming out as student rep. Remember, like I said, I'm this bitter, smart mouth kid. If you've been to a NOMA conference, there's a point where we give a student awards out. So we're at the banquet, we're all dressed up. The president at the time tells me, are you going to do it? I say respectfully, we're not giving an award out, so don't ask me to. Because in my mind, I didn't want to drop the bomb that I was going to drop. So they called me to the stage. Now, ladies and gentlemen, whoever's listening to this far and wide, understand that sometimes you can be smart and you can be right. I was so busy trying to be right, I wasn't smart. So I say that, I paint the picture. We're at a NOMA conference. The NOMA founders are here, the ones that are still alive. Again, 500 people on a stage. And I say to the crowd, NOMAS is not giving an award because NOMAS is in the process of financially seceding, which is separating from NOMA. So to give you an idea what that means, it's kind of like how AIA and AIAS are two organizations. The founder looked at me and literally grabbed his heart. And the talking to that I got from the president, including the whole NOMA board, was epic, including Brian Hudson, where it was like, dude, did you really have to do that? So at this point, I've done harm and I've done good. And I'm at a crossroads in my architectural development. I had got NOMA in architectural record that year. I had done a whole bunch of things, but I'm at my senior year. At this point, not to be cocky, at that time, there wasn't a school that did not know who I was in terms of that space of NOMA. And at the time, NOMA was not in the group of organizations that it is now with AIA, so on and so forth. We were fighting to get there. So I went to University of Toronto on a whim. It was like, no one knows me. I've never been to Toronto. And that was the beginning of a whole nother section of my life that's probably outside the scope of this podcast. But when I got to Toronto, I will say this. I thought no one was going to know me. Mind you, as a senior, I had been lecturing. I gave a lecture at Urbana-Champaign in Dr. Anthony's class as a senior. I was a keynote panelist already on different things. When I got to Toronto, this is pre-Google, they looked me up. Clark Kent was found out. I only was at University of Toronto for 1 year because that was the year my mom took ill. Ultimately, she passed. But my professor was like, who do you think you are? I had students who could read my resume. You've done X, Y, and Z. So the very thing I was running from was the problem in the sense I created. And I remember telling a teacher, like, oh, I'm going to need to miss these days because I have some business to tend to. Teacher was like, well, what do you have? I'm a keynote panelist. I was a panelist for something in Boston. Students looked me up. So now you can imagine my fellow academics didn't like that because who is this black dude who's got like this great reputation? And I paid for it. My ego was humbled and it made me go, did I make the right choice? I say all that to say you're going to have moments in this journey where you'll get the degree and you'll think you've done everything right and you will still question it.
I have a question before I get into it.
Sure.
Where did you get your master's degrees in real estate marketing? Was that in Toronto?
No. So short answer to that, I left Toronto in 2004. I went to Keller here, which was part of DeVry, that for a year. That didn't work out for some other reasons. So I got my master's of science in real estate from Roosevelt in 2008. I started grad school September 2003. So it took 5 years to get my first master's. And at that point, I was like, I don't care what the master's is in. I just want a degree at this point. Because I'm like, it took 4 years to get a bachelor's. It took 5 years to get a master's. I'm like, come on. I went through 3 schools, 2 countries. Mind you, during that time, and this is a separate subject to cover that impacted me, my mother died in 2004. My grandmother died in 2005. I was homeless in 2005. And I broke up with my fiance in 2006. All kink, like back to back to back. And again, I bring that up because there's a mental health component in architecture we don't talk about because what we do is already hard and then life be lifing on top of it. So I did all that. I got my degree in 2008 and I was super excited and I felt like I was here. I don't know if you all remember or are familiar with what happened in 2008 beside President Barack Obama becoming president. We went into economic freefall as a country. One of the things that caused the freefall was the crashing of the housing market. So I felt like I witnessed a cruel joke. I get a degree in real estate when the real estate market completely collapses. So I had made up my mind in 2008 I was leaving architecture. I had came to realize that I like architecture, I love design. Let me say that again. I like architecture, I love design. So that freed me, but it was depressing because I felt like I quit Navy SEAL training because this elite thing of us in architecture is like, you got to get licensed, you got to get licensed. And I had the moment, I felt like Hulk in Infinity War when he screamed, no! That's how I felt. I was like, I'm not doing this. This is insane. So then the second thing I wanted to do collapsed, real estate. I'm like, so short order, I could not get a job for 2 years and 4 months.
Your plan A and plan B both crashed?
Yes.
Wow.
So how I got into consulting was based on survival. I got let go of the last firm I worked for August of 2009. I didn't get a job till November of 2011.
Wow.
Now, again, this gets into mental health and depression issues. It's like, I did everything right. I fought to get this degree, and I can't do nothing with it. I have a Master of Science real estate from Roosevelt University. I affectionately call my degree the misery degree because of the letter, because I was like, the misery that entailed. So 2011, I'm working for a for-profit school, and I'm like, this real estate degree is not going to go nowhere. School offered me an opportunity, and I was like, well, you've done all these things. You know you can do it. Now learn it properly. So that's what led me to getting my MBA in 2012 at AIU.
I don't know if you've said this on the podcast, but I know you've told me that you weren't always good at school. Mm-hmm. But in that case, why did you keep going to school?
That's a wonderful question. People think that because I have a doctorate, I'm good at school. I'll tell you no. I'm stubborn. My sheer will at times just cannot be broken. And the more you tell me no, it's kind of like the MJ documentary, The Last Dance, like, then I take it personal. And in this space of architecture as a black man, I've heard no literally from 14. My first day of high school, I was told I can't be an architect because I was black. When I got to UIC, I got into arguments over this. Like, well, those people in those neighborhoods, I'm one of those people. So for me, not that I wasn't good, I was doing too many things. As I said earlier, it was NOMA, it was all these things. But when I focused, I was unstoppable. Number two, when I came into architecture, I laid out the plan like we all do, right? all right, I'm going to get a degree. I'm going to get licensed. I'm going to run my own firm. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have 2 kids and all that. And life said, hold my beer. That's what happened, honestly. My original plan was to get my master's of architecture because I was in a 4+2 situation. For the listeners, what that means is in architecture, if you don't have a professional degree, you have a 4-year degree, you have to do a 2-year for a master's for context. I was going to do this master's at Toronto. I was going to get an MBA. I was going to start a firm, and I was going to be the most greatest black design architect ever and live happily ever after. If you'd have told me 20 years ago that I would have a PhD, I would have laughed. That was not in the plans. I say that because life changed me. Life adapted. And then after getting the master's, I got this dope architectural background. I got a master's in real estate, but 2008 to 2012, like I told you, the market was shot. So a lot of architects left. A lot of design professionals left. A lot of people had to figure out how to make money. I didn't have a family, thankfully, but I still need to survive. I got an MBA because I was like, okay, I don't need to pay for an expensive MBA from University of Chicago. An MBA at its core is marketing, finance, accounting, management, and then pick one of those and then you major in them. That's an MBA anywhere. All right, I got that. And I think I know where this next question is going. So if you say all that, how did you end up wanting to get a doctorate?
Yeah.
So 2013, I'm working, and I'm still kind of really in an emotional fog because I'm like, I done all this education, but I'm not happy. At the time, I'm making maybe $50,000. I'm like, all this education, and I'm only making $50,000 a year. This is not working. A friend of mine tells me, you would be an awesome teacher. Now, you got to understand, I was the student that made most teachers cringe. So I'm saying like, no. Unbeknownst to me, she submits my resume to a university. I get a call. Oh, we're calling you in for an interview. I was so cavalier or nonchalant about it, I did not dress up for the interview. Wrinkled shirt, wrinkled pants. I was like, psh. Guy tells me, oh, we were going to hire you. We just wanted to meet you in person. I'm like, wait, what? And I'll never forget asking him this because I had sent in hundreds of resumes for jobs and didn't get them. And I had to ask for my ego's sake. I was like, why did you choose me? He was like, you had the perfect background. Like that almost brought me to tears because I'm like, if you're looking for a job, it just seems like no one ever responds. So that's how I became a professor at Harrington College of Design. Now at this point, I haven't taught anything seriously. They make it spicy because they don't tell me I'm teaching a foreign population. I'm teaching French students. My level of French is French fry, croissant, and pepe le pew. I've done a lot of things, but standing in front of 30 people who have paid to hear you teach them was probably one of the most scariest things ever. And we had a language barrier. But I got into it. I liked it. For the first time since I left architecture, I was happy about something. So since I started teaching, I had the great, grand, and glorious idea. I was like, how can I teach professional practice? Because again, it goes all the way back to that passion. Because my thing was, if you feel that pro practice sucked, how would you teach it? My students often called me cruel. They called me a lot of things, but they thanked me later. So one of the things I did in pro practice was I said, I'm not going to take them to a firm. I'm not going to give them a BS thing. So what I did is I picked all the business stuff, and they were interior design students for context. So just like architecture students, they only care about the studio. So we would go over business, finance, insurance, legal issues. And at the end of my class, I would turn groups into firms. I'm the principal of every firm. And the object of the game was get everything done, work with each other. You could hire and fire people. If a student got fired from a group, they had 2 days to join another group or they failed. And I introduced these things called curveballs. If my students are listening, they're probably going to cringe when they hear that word curveball. So a curveball would be this. Now imagine you got a studio project, you got a deadline, and I call you at some random time, like you got 12 hours to do this micro assignment. But I still got studio. Yeah, I know, but you got to get this done. And they were like, why did you do that? Because that's how the real world works. You got to manage your time to get this done and then still get the other things done. So beside me feeling like the guy from Saw, let's play a game and had fun with it, I realized I had a passion for teaching. I didn't have a passion for anything after architecture, to be blunt. So I was like, all right, I'm going to want to do this doctorate thing. IIT said no to me 2 more times. So IIT said no to me 4 times. So the irony of being here, I can say it in good fun now. I was denied, and I didn't take those denials well at all. I will say my ego felt a way about it. But the transformation, and now I can say this in good faith, what it takes to do a doctorate is so different than anything you do. And again, I thought I've been to architecture school, I got 2 master's degrees, I'm smart. No. When I say it was so humbling, like how you even write and how you talk changes. You have to be willing to be transformed. The real reason I wanted to be a doctor at first is I wanted people to call me a doctor. I'm not gonna lie. My ego was on Kanye, totally. Because it's cool. But in order to become a doctor, what you're saying is you want to be the subject matter expert on something, and you want to be able to speak on it with intensity and intentionality. And when you speak as a doctor, people look at your words differently, because my chair had even said the reason we do this is the rest of your life, people will say, oh, I talked to a doctor about it. And I often clarify, I'm like, I'm not a doctor of X, or this is my opinion. People say, why do you say that? That legally covers me for certain things. So when I decided to do the doctorate and I finally got accepted into it, I was, of course, excited. Yay, I'm on my way to being a doctor. Boy, I thought architecture school was hard. I got accepted in 2016 to my program. I had moved to Florida. I did what's called my DQE, which is your mid-program exams, 2 days after Hurricane Irma. Your DQE is basically 3 questions based on all 8 of your classes that you have to answer in essay form, and you get 7 days to do it. You fail twice, you're kicked out the program. No pressure.
No pressure.
No pressure. 2018, my dad begins to take ill. I moved back to Chicago. I had financial issues, couldn't go to school for a year, raised money to literally pay off my debts. I get back into school February 2020, COVID. January 2020, my dad really begins to take ill. My dad passes June 2020 while I'm still doing this. I do my proposal defense September 2020. I am diagnosed type 2 diabetic, and I was almost in a diabetic coma, and I almost died November 2020. Finally defend in 2021 in October. So when I say architecture school prepared me for everything that could go wrong, and when I became doctor, I'll be honest with you, it was kind of anticlimactic. It was like, I expected rainbows, I expected confetti. I ain't getting none of that. But I thought about, how did you get here? It was all from that little boy that was passionate about architecture. My dissertation was unique because in business school, you don't get no one that does a dissertation that's so specific to another industry this way. For me, it was kind of like I owed architecture this, because no one talks about how in a country of 380 million people, we have only 2,600 black architects today. And of that 2,600, not even 600 of those are African-American women. So I did this whole thing for 3 to 5 years. So that dissertation led me full circle back to NOMA, because I had to interview licensed architects that were black. And where do you find black architects?
NOMA, all standing there.
So while I do have a knack for narration and storytelling, the dissertation brought me full circle, because what I left out was when I left NOMA in 2004, I was bitter. I felt like I had did a lot. My mom dying had a hand in this, and I felt like I gave NOMA my everything, and I was burnt out. I didn't want to do anything NOMA. Brian and them spent years trying to get me back. I didn't go to another NOMA convention until 2018. I was completely off the radar. Like, I would see my peers, but also once I left architecture in 2008 in my mind, I'm like, the heck I need NOMA for? I couldn't get a job from y'all. I couldn't get anything from y'all. So why am I in this abusive relationship? And NOMA requires a lot. NOMA, these organizations require people and time. And I'm like, it's not making me money. It's not generating anything. And I was bitter. But when I went back to my first NOMA conference in Chicago in 2018, a lot of people know me in architecture. And coming full circle to be at a NOMA conference, to have that camaraderie of like-minded folks, I saw how NOMA had changed. The diversity of NOMA has changed from when I was a student. And again, I had to interview these people. And when I got done, I was like, you know what, I want to come back, because I got this amazing dissertation that's really rooted and based on NOMA. The literal foundational piece of my dissertation are 2 things: the Whitney Young speech in 1968 and the 2001 NOMA newsletter that I still have a copy of. So NOMA is the catalyst for my dissertation. So it kind of came back full circle, like the prodigal son has to come home. So they asked me to come back, and I was like, you know what? I got something to offer. And that's what motivated me even to come here, like even our conversation. I see myself in you all. I'm probably more qualified than a lot of NOMA professionals to speak to students, not because I was once a student, but because I executed at the highest level you could as a student. I can tell you all the pitfalls. I can tell you everything. And a lot of people don't understand the pressure of NOMA students. And I say that because you're in an organization that is historically black, but you're united because of architecture. You're dealing with the internal issues of that. Then you're dealing with everything with architecture in itself, with its problematic insert patriarchy, race, blah, 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 phobia, so on and so forth. And then you're trying to be people and you're young adults growing. No one ever considered that for me because it was just like, oh, well, it's him, so he could do that. Or no one considers the humanity, and not to make it all existential, but the level of juggling you're doing now is better than most adults. I tell anyone, architecture students are cut from a different cloth. If you can go through architecture school, you can go through anything. Because architecture school is the same juggle. You got models, you got drawings, you got the studio thing. And I imagine here you got construction, you got materials, you got blah, 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 all the other stuff. Real talk. You're trying to maintain GPAs and all this. You're trying to figure out grad school. You're dealing with an organization depending on a local and national level. And then you got a personal life. That's not easy to do. And then you're like, well, geez, what do I want to do in architecture? And then with the organization, you're trying to get people to join NOMA because you're trying to run it like a business. You're trying to get people to pay dues. Then you're trying to provide a service. So when you walk around campus and go, this is why you should join, because most of them don't care because they want to be the next Rem Koolhaas, Oscar Niemeyer, Zaha Hadid, insert name. And you're trying to market to these people. And then you're working with the competition / frenemy in the form of AIAS and trying to figure out how to make the community better for everybody here, even though they have the bigger organization, bigger budget, bigger follow, insert this, but you still got to collaborate. No one tells you all this when you sign up. Like, I could just see the look in you guys' eyes like, he gets it.
For once.
He gets it. And then you go to an INOMA meeting. So you got all these old folks, me included, to talk about the good old days and all that. And you're like, how do I talk to them about getting a job? As I look at Alex, which is why I did what I did. Because a few people like Brian did that for me, where it was like, I don't know how to talk to this person, or I've read about this person and they're maybe a hero in my eyes or all that. Like, how do I walk up to him and go, sir, my name is L. David Stewart, and I want to get an internship? You're scared they're going to be like, go, little student, get out of my face. But they're not. Those people understand. And you go to these adult functions and you huddle in the crowd with your other classmates because it's like all those old people are talking about the old days and blah, 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 blah. That's all of what you're dealing with. And then you're like, oh, it's my 4th or 5th year. How am I going to get an internship? Do I want to be an architect? How do I want to be an architect? I don't know if I want to. I just want my degree. I want to be out of here. No one understands that. So for me, as someone who went through it, I find it my duty to say, I get it.
It's very helpful, too, because I feel like those questions do come up all the time. Like, even a few weeks ago, and I was like, do I even want to do this anymore? So, because it's such a long road. Architecture isn't what you think it is until you're in it. I'm not even fully in it yet. And I won't quit or anything. And I do want to continue doing this. It's just those questions do come up, especially when you don't know the answers to certain questions. And it's hard when, like, talking about it with people who don't understand, and they're just like, just finish. You don't know what you're talking about. Just do it.
A lot of people quit after their first year of architecture because once they see what it requires, they're like, oh no, I'm not doing this. And you got to think there's a certain level of insanity to do what we do because we're excited. Like, we're the creepy people that walk in buildings and touch because it's tactile. And oh my God, is it this kind of this brick? And you talk about architectural styles and be like, oh, this is modernism or postmodernism. And this was designed by Mies van der Rohe. And they're like, what? Like, what? So we exist in a unique space. And another thing I did want to touch on, because I know I mentioned my international background, that is the last part that forms me. So, as I said earlier, Walter Gropius was a big influence of mine. UIC had a time to study abroad. I think they still have Versailles in Paris, but they had one in Berlin. I was like, I don't want to go to France for 9 months because if I don't like it, I'm going to be mad. Berlin for a month can work. And I was more excited to see that. So I went to Berlin when I was 20. Never been out the country. My parents were like, aren't you scared to go to Germany because, Nazis and things like that? It's like, we live in the most segregated city in the United States.
That's so true.
Like, seriously? I was like, there are neighborhoods in Chicago people of color don't go to. So Berlin won't be that bad. It was one of the most life-changing things for me because I remember thinking, I'm literally on the other side of the pond. And I took architectural history and anthropology. Architectural history is obvious. Anthropology, because I'm not writing all them papers at UIC. So it was cool to talk about the Berlin Wall and go touch the Berlin Wall later on in the day. That experience then led me to go to University of Toronto because I was like, you've been out the country before. As an international student, as a person of color, it was very different. Even at the airport, they're like, are you military? 9. You're an entertainer? 9. I'm actually going here because I actually have a brain. So the school I went to, the Free Universität, was an amazing school. And I was like, wow, I want to do this somewhere else. Because, and if you all get a chance to study abroad, please do. It will change your view of the world. Americans think the world is centered around them. When you go to a country and as an American, you're the foreign person, it's very humbling. My level of German or sprechen Sie Deutsch is blech. But people would appreciate me trying to speak my German. I'd be like, guten Tag. And they're like, you speak English. You'd be like, oh, God, yes, thank you. But more times than not, Americans don't do that because there is an expectancy that I'm an American, you're going to cater to me. So moving to Canada was easy because I'm like, well, it's just upstairs. So I'm like, well, I don't want to go to school anywhere else. Go here. I mean, since then, I've studied in Canada. I've been to London. I've been to Paris. I've been to Egypt. I've worked in Haiti, Brussels. I've bounced around a bit. And part of that also goes back to that same little kid that was a graffiti artist that would see the city. Because every time I see a city, I eat the food, I take in the culture, I look at their buildings and go, oh, you learn the culture and you bring that back. And I think as someone that's always in architecture, you will always do that. So like to see the pyramids was amazing because it's like, yo, how did they build this? And this thing is still here and it's rocks. Walking around in London looking at these houses are older than the United States. So all that international and then being an international student, I know what it's like because when you're a foreign student, you can't do the things you do as a domestic student. Like I couldn't work in Canada. Well, I could, but the work visa was like $2,500 back then. I don't know of any student that just has $2,500 in the back pocket. So it was just learning how to live off the money I could get off financial aid. And that's hard because a lot of times students, when they come to a foreign country, including here, it's very difficult to adjust. Like it's the schoolwork, but then there's the social element in living. Like those of us who are American citizens, it's like, okay, it may suck, but I can actually go get a job at McDonald's to supplement something. You can't do that as a foreign student because of different rules, regulations, so on and so forth. And I think being a foreign student also taught me how to survive. Because if you can survive in a country with no one you know there and you don't know the language, how hard is it to move to another city in the United States? So those experiences pushed me to be better. And to me, those are educational experiences that you add to who you are and how you view the world. So please, by all means, travel.
You have so much experiences that you have done. I feel like you have truly like lived and like seen the world, experienced with the things that you can do and pushed your limits. And I just want to ask about your work right now. What type of things are you working on and what are you doing right now?
So one, I'm a professor at National Louis. I have my own consultancy, Ghost Wolf Holdings. A lot of that is in the ready space. My job, though, also beyond that, is helping businesses grow. No one plans for failure, but no one plans for growth. My job is what happens when you are successful? What happens when you need to grow and scale? So I do operation plans, business plans for older business, succession plans if need be, like how are you going to transition? And a lot of time, even consulting advisory spaces and different things. I've actually consulted on an Emmy-nominated movie. I've done other things in the consultant space and taking those experiences and working with them. And then my other thing is what has me traveling a lot now is my photography. I'm a photographer for now 26 years. For again, still the art connection. Started in high school, even parallel to architecture. I've always believed that you needed a profession, a passion, and a hustle. So you have your profession, that's what you go to school for. Your passion may not be something you get paid for, but it's something that balances you out. And then the hustle is, if the profession ain't working, how can I make money? So I've kind of used photography as passion and hustle interchangeably. Stop, started. Then in 2015, I got serious. Like, all right, learn photography. I had got a good eye, so I learned technical stuff. I had 2 studios at one point. I have 1 studio here in Chicago currently. And it's still the thing that I do creatively regularly. So my work pays, but I still sometimes just go shoot just for me or do fun things, because the regret I have of architecture is architecture made me not want to draw because I did it for a career for so long. So it's like when you do it as the thing you pay bills, it's like that's the last thing you want to do. So in order for me to not make that mistake with photography, I just sometimes like, just go take a camera, go shoot. Don't have a purpose, just go shoot. Go remember why you want to do it. My photo work has been published in a few magazines, including Cranes here. So I've been blessed to get other opportunities. And that's how I kind of juggle everything. So for me, it's like, I got to have something that pays the bills. I got to have a passion that keeps me sane. And then, like most people, I like money. So that's kind of the short order answer of everything.
Now that I understand you a little bit more, it seems like you're like a melting pot. Like there's so many things you do. And sometimes I'm so concerned on how you juggle all of this.
That is a question everyone asks me about. They're like, how? Well, for me, and this is a good and a bad thing. The pro is I'm a great multitasker. The con is I'm a great multitasker. Sometimes I've had to learn in my older years, when you really need to focus, stop, put everything on the side, and zero in on this one thing. My dissertation was like that. That last 6 months, I just focused on just that. And sometimes I'll do that if I really want to grow or learn or experiment with some things. If you know your priorities, then you can manage multiple things. But also, and this is a lesson for everyone listening, including you too, you also learn the art of the word no. That's what I had to learn. Because you're so busy, like, I don't want to miss an opportunity. I want to miss something. Sometimes just no. And I know how to better take care of myself. I may have an opportunity, but it's like, you know what? Let that one go. You need more rest, or I want to do that. Let that go, because just stop. So that's how I manage that. As busy as I am, I'm also as intentional about self-care and resting.
What last pieces of advice would you like to give to future students and designers?
No one gets out of this thing alive. No matter how arrogant the superstar is, they were once in your shoes. And lastly, the quote that motivates me as an architect that I learned about by the name of Hans Holland. Simple. Everything is architecture.
Thank you for those words. They were very beautiful. And last of all questions, some people find it the hardest. What are your future plans?
I recently have acquired a couple of mentors, and they've been asking me that. I know one thing I am working on is I plan on having an art gallery in Florida in the next couple of years. Beyond that, I loosely plan now. Like I said, when I wanted to be an architect, I was like, I'm going to be an architect. I'm going to get this degree. I'm going to get this MBA. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have 2 kids. And life is going to be perfect. And I'll be 43. I've learned if you want to make God or what you believe in laugh, make plans. So I loosely plan. I have ideas of what I want, and I'm going to experiment with that. And if my bills are paid, I'm going to have fun with it. But I look at life this way. As someone with 4 degrees, and I've done all these things, whenever I leave this planet, no one's going to remember the degrees. No one's going to remember the travels I've done. It's how did you make this world better? That's where my focus is at.
Thank you for giving your time and energy to be able to do this episode.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
I want to thank everyone for listening. We release our episodes monthly. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform. You can also follow us on Instagram at beyondthesurface_NOMAS IIT. I want to thank our producer, Caleb Kwok, the NOMA's IIT team, and WIIT for making this podcast possible. Thank you for listening to this episode of Beyond the Surface featuring Dr. L. David Stewart. Until next time, goodbye.